Hello, Darlene. This is David McClellan. This is my comparative project for 5115 Research Methods for Education. I'm just going to quickly jump into this and look at the two example research projects that I looked at. So the two research project examples I looked at, one was done by a Masters of Education student entitled Analysis of Academic Peer Leaders' Perceptions of Academic Skills and Performances. And the second one was by a PhD student who was looking at elementary teachers' grading practices. It's entitled, Does Reality Reflect the Rubric? So these are just some of the questions that you gave. Let's start with how both are organized. So both kind of follow a similar organization in terms of having an introduction where you look at the research topic and kind of why this is worth being researched, some of the past research. So there's a lot of references introduced in the introduction section, then a methodology section where you're looking at how the data is collected, what instruments are used, that sort of thing. Then a results section where you're presenting your data using visuals and using text and that sort of thing. And then the last part is where you analyze the data. So your analysis discussion section where you're using your results to explain the findings in your research, but also presenting potential limitations of your study, as well as maybe recommending some future research. Okay. For this part, I'm just going to quickly look at the methods the researchers use. So study on peer leadership. They use both quantitative and qualitative data. So in terms of the qualitative data being used, the researcher tried to make the questions that were open-ended and then look at identifying commonalities in content, uniqueness in content, confusions and contradictions in content, and maybe some missing information. In terms of looking at quantitative data, maybe they had more closed-ended questions and they were able to use a kind of statistical analysis program using a code book. Okay. In terms of the other, this is collected through kind of secondhand data. Actually, both examples were collected through secondhand data, where the researchers use student-teacher demographic information, student report card grades, and student standardized test scores, as well as behavioral information. Okay. All right, question 7. So in the two research projects I looked at, it had examples of tables, text, and diagrams. So here's some examples. This would be a diagram looking at the qualitative results of the study on peer students. This is a more quantitative look. So these tables just give statistical information that yield the results of the study, and just kind of comparing the second research project. You see kind of a more comparative analysis where it's looking at teachers versus students, male versus female, different ethnicities. So the results in these tables are yielding a more comparative look. Question 8, are there any similarities in the documents you have chosen? So yes, they're similar in terms of how they're organized. They're both examples of action research designs. So they're systematic procedures to gain information, to improve the way educational settings operate. They're both relatively the same length, 60 to 80 pages. Differences though in terms of the peer leaders' perception studies use both quantitative and qualitative data. whereas the second research project looking at teaching grading practices was more quantitative. The number of participants was quite different. So it was about 2,000 in the first research project, whereas it was about 9,000 in the second research project. I guess another similarity would be the fact that in both cases they were using secondary data. They didn't obtain the data on their own. All right, so yeah, those were the findings in terms of comparing the two projects. And yeah, I could see a lot of similarities. It was very helpful in terms of how to organize a research project. So if I am doing one at some point, this would be extremely helpful. Thank you so much, Darlene. I really enjoyed the course. It was very informative and helpful. All the best.